It's common to experience a range of emotions throughout your financial journey. Depending on your circumstances, you may feel anxious, stressed, fearful, or guilty. At other times, you could feel empowered, hopeful, or at peace. What you feel could be just as complex as what you're going through. I'm your host, Melissa Mazard. Tune into Financial Feels as my guests share their personal stories with money, the lessons they've learned, and the emotions they felt along the way. Most of us can only dream of inheriting money. What would you do if you received over $500,000? In this episode, Haley shares her financial journey of going from a little to a lot, then down to negative. This is a good one.
My earliest memory of money, 4th or 5th grade, I remember they had some event at the school where people, I don't know if they donated clothes or what it was, but students who didn't have a lot of money were qualified to go shopping in the cafeteria or wherever they had all the clothes. And I remember being able to go do that and then tying it together with the lack of money. That's when I really remember oh, money is a thing that is necessary. I mean, I have memories before that were buying candy bar with grandma or whatever. But that's the first significant money memory that I have where I'm this is ingrained in me as being different because of money. As a child, I didn't really ever feel different up until that point. That was the moment where I was oh, I feel like there's a difference between some of my friends and myself in regards to finances. And that was the thing that was kind of separating us. I grew up, a little context, I grew up in a single mom household until I was 11 or 12. And then my mom married my stepdad, who then adopted me. So most of my childhood, it's a single mom household. My mom did the best she could given the resources and the knowledge that she had, but it was really hard. And I didn't really feel how hard it was up until that point. But then I did start to notice the differences. And I think that I'm a former elementary school teacher and I taught 4th grade. So this is kind of relevant. I think that that's when people really start to notice the differences in name brands and how your friends can afford this, this, and this, and you can't. Or maybe it's the other way around, where you're able to go on your family's boat for the weekend and your friends don't have the same resources. So that was when I started to identify the differences financially. One other moment that I really remember was in high school when I was able to qualify for free and reduced lunch when my parents had been laid off during the recession. And my mom is a very humble woman who takes pride in not getting help. And it's interesting looking back. I'm why didn't you use all the resources that were available to you? You were low income. You were a single mom struggling, but she didn't want to ask for help. She didn't want to be known as the single mom on welfare, regardless of how hard it was. It was I don't want to have to ask for the help for these resources that I qualify for, rightfully so, given the situation. But I think I totally qualified for a lot more than we actually use. So there was this situation at the school where I got the clothing that we got to shop for when I was in 4th grade. And then when I was in high school, I was you guys lost your job. We shouldn't have to be paying for lunch. This is something that is a resource for a reason. Let's apply for this. And I had to really kind of convince my parents into doing that because they really didn't want to ask for help. And I started my podcast in 2020, Price of Avocado Toast, and we started talking about our financial journey and stuff like that. And I brought up being from a single mom, low income household on the podcast, and it really offended my mom because that's not how she wants to be remembered. She wants to be remembered as the one who did everything she could, who worked really hard. And I do remember that as well, but we can't discredit my experience, which was that it was hard. It didn't really have have an effect on my social life. I feel like it was more an internalized big deal. My friends genuinely didn't care where I lived or what I wore, but I thought they did. But some of my best friends lived in these gigantic houses that were like McMansions, driving BMWs that they got for their 15th birthdays. And I thought that they would think that I'm less than for not having the same things. But that was never really a thing. That was totally me and not them. And I think it's funny when you look back with just the emotions that occur when you're in your early teens and early 20s. We think everyone cares so much more than they actually do. My friends didn't care. They enjoyed coming to my house, but I thought that they cared. I never had to help out at home financially. My parents always kept finances kind of separated from me. They tried to hide it and make it like not a big deal, but I saw them arguing over credit cards and the way they were spending their money. I felt that it was hard, but they never expressed to me that it was really hard, other than like, we're not going to do that because we don't have money. But it wasn't like, I think sometimes we hear people say like, we can't do that because we have no money. I don't have that ingrained in my head. Like, oh, we're broke. We can't do that. We have no money. I don't have that. They didn't talk like that, but it was definitely like, if we didn't have money to afford something, for example, cheerleading in high school, I was a cheerleader and I didn't have the multiple thousands of dollars to spend being a cheerleader. So I asked some family if they could sponsor me, and my great aunt ended up paying for my cheerleading. So I was still able to do things, but if my parents didn't have the money to do it, they would just kind of be like, wait, that's not something we can do. We'll see if we can make it work, but that's not something we have the means to do right now. Looking back, my parents borrowed a lot of money from my great-grandma. My great-grandma helped fund a lot of things. For example, when I was in 8th grade, I got to go to the New York, DC trip, which was like $2,000 at that time. And my grandma paid for the whole thing. My great aunt paid for my cheer camp and all my uniforms and stuff when I was in high school. And that was a lot of money. So things were still able to be possible, but it wasn't necessarily my parents that were the ones paying for it. My parents never talked to me directly about their financial habits, but I would like overhear conversations and stuff like that. But they actually ended up getting a divorce in 2012. So the recession hit them really hard. They lost their jobs in like 2008, and it took several years before things kind of like crash and burn. But they foreclosed on a house. They were unemployed they ran out of unemployment benefits, both of them. That's how long they were unemployed, which was quite a long time. And it just was really, really hard. So that's when I really felt the tension with their finances. There were things that were being put on credit cards. And I think in regards to my parents trying to make it work financially, most of the time, if we had family that could help out, like my great grandma, she would help out and pay for something. But if that wasn't an option, something would just go on a credit card, and it was not a big deal. It was just, we'll put it on a credit card and deal with it later. It wasn't talked about that credit cards are bad. It wasn't talked about that was a bad thing to put something on a credit card. Like, oh, well, it was just like, well, they made it work in my eyes. But then I found out when they filed for divorce that my dad had like 20 credit cards that my mom didn't totally know about. So there was a lot of credit card spending happening that made things feel like they were way better than they actually were. I think when I saw how much my parents were using credit cards, I think it validated the fact that credit cards were okay. First job was when I was 14. It was the summer between freshman and sophomore year of high school, and I started teaching swim lessons. ironically continued to teach swim lessons for like 15 years. But I taught swim lessons, I became a lifeguard, and I worked really, really hard and totally overcompensated for not having things by feeling like I need to work my butt off to make money so I can then afford these things. And that was the beginning of my poor financial habits, because I would get a paycheck. And my first job, this is like 2007 or so, I started making $12.50 an hour in California, which was a lot of money at that time. Now, granted, I'm teaching swim lessons. These are for like 1 hour, 2 hour little blocks here and there. It wasn't like a 40-hour job by any means. However, I'd get a paycheck that was like $500, and I would just head immediately to the mall to spend everything on name brand things so I could have the things that then resembled all the things that my friends had around me. So that was me, though. That was totally me. My friends didn't say that I had to have Abercrombie and Hollister and all these name brand things in order to be their friends, but I felt like I had to. When I was 17, I moved away to college and never came back because I wanted to be somewhere not in the middle of nowhere. I didn't really like where I lived. It was just very isolating. I wanted to go away to college, and I knew that that was going to be my ticket. So I went away to a 4-year university, and home life there was a lot of turmoil at that point during my freshman and sophomore years because my parents were getting a divorce. So I didn't have much desire to come home anyway. So I stayed home. I stayed in my college town, and then I ended up living there for like 10 years. Due to my parents' financial situation during this time, again, they're in the middle of losing their house. My parents are unemployed. It's not a good time. I qualified for a lot of grants for college. So my undergraduate ended up costing like $90,000 total. And I think I left undergrad with like $30,000 of loans. So I had a lot of grants and scholarships for my first few years. Like many millennials, took out way too much of the financial aid offer. I took out more money than I needed, which is why I ended up with loans. My tuition itself was not $90,000. That was just me taking out more than I needed. There was not much financial education. They were not college educated. They've never done this before. They didn't know how to tell me what to do. The financial aid office most definitely was not telling us how to take out money. They just were telling us that if you want to do it, you can pay for it. It'll be fine. Take out some loans. You'll be good. I didn't have to work in college, but I did work because, again, I'm chasing the nice stuff. When I was in college working, it wasn't for my living expenses. My financial aid package covered more than just tuition and all of my living expenses and food. This is so I could go buy a Michael Kors purse and look like I have it together. So it wasn't I had to work to pay my rent. It was, I already have my financial aid to pay my rent. I want more money. When I was a sophomore, my great uncle passed away and left some money for my parents and myself. And I received $25,000 inheritance from my uncle. And I'm like 19. I studied abroad my junior year of college. I moved to Sweden and had the most amazing year. I was there for a year and I went to like 18 different countries. I traveled everywhere. It was beautiful. But in that year, which my financial aid package covered my tuition and my rent, in the year I spent the $25,000 just traveling and doing whatever else I was doing in Europe. And I was so broke that I didn't have enough money to buy my plane ticket home. And that was my first moment of, oh no, how did that happen? That went very quickly. I knew my $500 little paychecks disappeared quickly. I saw that happen when I went to the mall. This was a different ball game. That was $25,000 that was gone in like 11 months while I was abroad. And I had no regrets, but I definitely had an aha moment of that went very quickly. I knew exactly where it went. I traveled, I had an amazing time, but it slipped through my fingers, to say the least. I spent 5 years in college. So during my 4th year in college, when I came back from living in Sweden, I opened up my first credit card after I lived in Sweden. I've done some reflecting with my friends that I lived in Sweden with, and we kind of all did the same thing. We either got credit cards while we were in Sweden because we ran out of money traveling the world and we needed to pay for our flights home, or we got them when we got back. And that's when the credit card cycle started for me. My first credit card was a Macy's credit card. So it was like a $500 limit at Macy's, just to buy some nice sunglasses or whatever. But my first actual credit card that you could use in other places, not just a store credit card, was an American Express credit card. It was like a Delta Airline American Express credit card. I have no idea why they approved me for that. I bought it for travel points, and this is so funny looking back because we use credit cards for travel hacking now, and it had one of those sign-on bonuses where it was like 20,000 miles if you do this, this, and this. But I just interpreted it, I'm 21 or whatever, as if I get this credit card, I can then use it and travel 21,000 miles. Actual miles. Like, I can fly to Germany and back. 21,000 miles is a lot. I had no idea what a mile on a credit card actually was or how much the dollars converted over to miles and points, but that's where it started. And it got maxed out very quickly. I had no idea what I was doing. And I ended up having a couple little credit cards through Wells Fargo, which was my bank at the time, and a couple store credit cards, and then this big giant American Express one. Over, I think, like a 2-year period, I ended up maxing everything out. And then I'm like in $10,000 of credit card debt without knowing what I was doing. And I think that that's often how it starts for people. I fell down a rabbit hole and I found Clear One Advantage, the debt consolidation company. Paying off all of those credit cards should be the end. I did it, but that's just the beginning. I met my husband around that same time, and when we met, I was going through the debt consolidation. He had, right after we met, received $600,000 from a wrongful death lawsuit payout after his grandmother died of mesothelioma, and her husband filed lawsuits based off of negligence and wrongful death. And the family won millions of dollars. My husband's father passed away when he was younger, so whatever would have gone from the grandmother to her son was divided between his heirs. So my husband, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law each got $1 million. But after legal fees, lawyers, and everything, it was $600,000 for each person. My husband was 24 at the time, and I was 23. I'm going through this $10,000 debt consolidation. That was the beginning of when things really started to spiral. So we met and combined our finances very early, from almost day one. We moved in together after knowing each other for 3 months. We just were like glued to each other, like like a married couple, but in our early 20s, and we just met. Like, I don't recommend this at all. It could have gone extremely sideways, but the poor spending habits continued because, the debt consolidation was a Band-Aid. And I blew through $25,000 my uncle gave me a couple years before that, and then got into $10,000 of debt. My husband helped me pay that off quickly. So again, Band-Aid situation. And my husband's situation growing up was very similar to mine. Single mom, low income, but they had 3 kids. I was just a single child. His situation was definitely way tighter than mine actually was. And his mom never remarried. His whole entire life was a single income household. And he got lottery winning type money as a 24-year-old with 0 financial education. And we blew it. We spent all of it and then got into over $220,000 of combined debt in 3.5 years. It was 2019 and I'm pregnant with our first child, and I came home from Costco with some muffins, and my husband and I got in a big fight over muffins, and we don't really argue ever about anything. we got in this big fight over muffins. And I'm like, what's wrong? Like, what's really the issue here? Because it can't be the muffin. And we realized the month before was the first month we were both of us bringing home teacher incomes as like salaries getting paid beginning of the month. And you have to let that stretch for the whole month. And we went on a trip for our anniversary. And that's the 8th of the month. So after we got home from our anniversary trip, we had no money, like $0. And so everything was getting put on our credit cards, like our electric bill, our water bill, like groceries. And then a couple weeks later, I came home with these muffins from Costco, and we were like, what are we doing? We're fighting over $7 muffins. This is pretty ridiculous. We should be okay. We have the income coming in. We should be okay. And that was the big, big red flag for us, because we don't want to live a life where we're arguing over $7. That feels ridiculous. But also, why weren't we okay? And that was the red flag. Why are we struggling so much financially? Well, we had accrued $27,000 of credit card debt. We had $130,000 of student loans. We had a $50,000 car loan, a $17,000 timeshare that we're paying on. And our life was just inflated. Our income wasn't nearly what our expenses were. And that's where we were like, we have to fix this. My brother had recommended Dave Ramsey like years and years before, and his Total Money Makeover book. And I kind of listened to him a little bit, but didn't really take it into too much consideration. But then when we found ourselves in that situation, we were like, let's listen to this audiobook together and start listening to his podcast. And we went like all in on Dave Ramsey and his plan. We drank the Kool-Aid and then some for a good like year. And then we kind of took what worked for us and left the rest, stepped away from following him exclusively, and then continued to kind of do our own thing. And we ended up paying off $132,000 of our $220 in a year and a half just by slashing. I mean, we went very extreme. Our approach was extremely drastic. And I'm so thankful my husband and I come from similar backgrounds, because when life hit the fan, we know how to buckle down. And we did, because we know how to be broke. We've done it before. And it wasn't nearly as hard as it is for some people, because we were like, let's just go back to this place we've been. We grew up this way. It'll be a hard few years, and then we can reevaluate after we pay off all this debt. But that's what we did. We cut everything drastically. We got second jobs. We threw every extra penny at our debt. We were extremely aggressive. My husband got a second job while he was teaching. So that was quite a bit of money coming in. But we budgeted and sliced things to, like, for example, our dining out when we first started tracking was like $700 a month, and we cut it down to like $20. We cut things extremely drastic. At this time, we were living off of like $5,600 a month was our like budget. We needed that to pay our bills. And that was 2019, 2020. Now, in 2023, our current budget is like close to $10,000. So we sliced it almost in half. We went a little extreme. And we sold things. We sold quite literally everything we could sell, things that we weren't using. We sold cameras, clothing, little kitchen things. We had no problem paying off debt. We got really good at paying off debt. I have to thank Dave Ramsey for that, as in he is so debt driven that that's all we cared about. But then I realized we weren't really learning those things that were like how to actually manage your money 101. It was like, we can pay off debt with a vengeance. I can do that very well. Can I stay out of debt and continue to budget and work on those actual sustainable habits? That's what we had to continue to figure out after the fact, after we paid off all this debt. When we were following Dave Ramsey, I felt quite a bit of shame, to be honest, with stepping away from his plan at all. Anything that was not on his 7 baby steps, if I did it differently, I felt really bad about it. And our story is not conventional. Not everyone has $600,000 just land in their lap. Like, this isn't normal. So our approach to paying off debt wasn't the most conventional either. Before all of this started, like really paying stuff down, we did a cash out refinance against our equity in our home. We took out money and paid off my car because we had a lot of equity in our house. We were able to do that. So we paid off my $50,000 car. We cashed out my husband's Roth IRA contributions. These are things I don't necessarily recommend, but they worked for us in our situation. So we did liquidate quite a bit of things to get things going. We had 2 paid off vehicles. That's a lot of privilege. A lot of people don't have 2 brand new paid off vehicles, but we had that because we had $600,000. Because of the original $600,000, we had some assets we were able to liquidate to then expedite the rest of our debt payoff journey. My husband liquidated his Roth IRA contributions, like I said. He sold his car. We ended up selling both of the paid off vehicles to pay off debt. And once I realized, like, this is what's working for us, I do not recommend people are just cashing out their retirement. That's not necessarily the approach I recommend people go. But we were like, we're not even 30. We're not even 30. We can fix this. We have time on our side. We can fix this and then we'll be on the other side and we can invest aggressively and we can get way better than where we're at right now. I think the biggest way we overcame all of the shame and the feelings that we were feeling was just by being so public about our story, starting the podcast, going on Instagram, and being fully transparent. Because up until this point, we were the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses with the perfect little life. And then we decided to go very public, telling everyone everything we've done with money. And everyone was like, what? I thought you guys were fine. Like, I had no idea. And that's when I realized, well, yeah, you have no idea because people don't talk about this. And then we started being the people in our lives and all the people around us lives that were facilitating these conversations about money and money management, financial education, budgeting, debt, all of this. This was never an open conversation until we started the conversation. And then I realized a lot of people are in they're in similar situations with very different ways of getting there. Now, we had a lot of money. We got into a lot of debt. It's a different way that we got there than someone else. But us having $27,000 of credit card debt was just as heavy as my friend who might have $15,000 of credit card debt. And I realized, wow, we're actually kind of all on the same page, working towards this thing quietly, in silence, pretending like everything's fine. And that's when we started to work through things. It was done very publicly. It was done through our podcast episodes, years of talking to people through social media. And eventually, a year after we started our podcast, I started my financial coaching business. I was a teacher, like I mentioned earlier, and I just decided I wanted to help people feel better about their money. And I wasn't really wanting to go back to like the actual classroom at that point because I had a couple young kids, but my business was just kind of born. It's just kind of crazy looking back. I'm like, oh, now I help people manage their money. And I'm the one who had terrible money management for so long. But now I get to actually help people have that education and transparency with their own finances so that they can make better financial choices. And hopefully I can be the person in someone's life, like whoever your econ teacher was. So I feel like we really worked through our own shame by opening up the door to the conversation with other people. Someone advice on finances in general, it's going to be to get started now. Don't wait until you're 30 because you're going to feel like an adult, or wait until you're 45. Like, get started now. It doesn't have to mean that you pay off $132,000 in a year and a half. That was aggressive. That was a lot. We did that very intensely. However, you can start paying off debt now. You can start investing now. If you wait even just another year, you could be going backwards. Like, if you ask yourself, like, what does my life look like in 2 years if I get this together and really get on my best financial track? What does that look like? You probably can't even imagine what that life looks like because you haven't tapped into it yet. But also ask yourself, what happens if I don't start now and get this together? So just get started. Because you don't have to do everything all at once. You don't have to pay off all your debt and max out your 401k and live your best life all at the same time. I believe you can do all of that. It just has to be prioritized. We are on basically all social media at Price of Avocado Toast. Our podcast is available wherever you're listening to this podcast. And our Twitter is Price Avocado, just because they don't like all of our letters. But we're available everywhere. And I appreciate you having me on your podcast, Melissa. This is really nice to share my story. It's always wild when I take someone down the memory lane. I'm like, there's been a lot there. But I have to say, before we log off, we went so extreme in our approach and cut everything and got to the other side. And we still have debt. We still have some student loans. We'll pay them off eventually, but we're kind of waiting to see what's going on with those. But we don't have credit card debt anymore. And now we use credit cards responsibly, and we do travel hacking. And I'm living quite literally my best life right now. A life I couldn't have even imagined 4 years ago when we were getting in an argument over $7. So we went and cut everything, and I've brought everything and then some back into my life, and I can actually afford it now and do it responsibly. And it feels like such a beautiful full circle moment to be where I'm at now, because 4 years ago I was like, oh, what did we do? This is like the worst of the worst, the rock bottom. And I think people need to hear that. It doesn't have to just be cutting everything and being miserable forever. We worked really hard for 2 years, really hard. But now I get to relax and enjoy the finer things in life that I've always liked and not feel bad about it. And I can actually afford it and pay for it. And it feels so good to be in control. And now I get to help people have that same feeling, because I'm like, oh, that was cool. I wish that I could have felt that all along, but I didn't. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know how to manage my money. And then when you learn that, it's pretty cool. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Haley, for sharing your journey with us and for doing the work to inspire and help others along their own. Stay tuned for the next episode.